All right, so I'll go ahead and just do a quick introduction. So as Caitlin mentioned, so I'm VP of Product Management here at Auvik. Been in the industry quite a while, in lots of fun different roles, ranging from tech support, development, so like actually software development, sales, and product management roles. Lots of great experiences across all those different areas, but really drives my passion is really around automation and security. I'm definitely hoping to weave some of those topics in today. And last but not least, I'm also on the IoT Advisory Council for CompTIA, trying to help shape the future of how MSPs work with IoT. I'm just going to go ahead and pass this over to Max, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
For sure. Welcome everyone today. My name is Max Eidsvik. I'm the product manager for Enable Passportal. I myself have been in the industry for about 4 or 5 years. I have experience spanning technical support as well. I worked on the sales team originally when I came into Passportal back before the Enable/SolarWinds purchase. And now today I am working as the product manager. So last point that I'll bring up about myself was I am an original employee of Passportal. I think I was the 17th or 18th one. However, on the sales side, just happy to see it continue to grow and do wonderful partnership webinars like this.
Awesome, Max. Well, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Oh, for sure. I'm just going to start my video as well, something I wasn't able to do prior. Perfect. Partnering to win. So how Enable Passportal and partnerships like what we have with Auvik can position your MSP to continue to win, to continue to drive business and do it in an efficient manner. We have some wonderful legal slides that come up next here that we'll just quickly jump through to get to the actual meat of the presentation itself. 5 ways that Auvik and Passportal can help your MSP win. This is just a precursor to what's going to come out through the rest of the webinar. Some quick notes on how we can help you win is you can become secure and you can know it. By adopting this solution like Passportal, you can know that our security measures are putting your keys to the kingdoms in a good place. They're putting them in a secure place and a place that you, the MSP, control access to. Additionally, you can automate anything, whether that be the employee lockout workflow, password rotations, watching documentation within the platform itself. Automate it. Stop the manual looking for it. Stop the manual checking in. Set it and forget it. Kind of like your stock market. Pick your stocks, you buy them, you forget, you look again in 20 years when you've lost all your money. Finally, monitoring. So bringing all this stuff into one spot, you'll be able to monitor it from one location, improve your efficiency, and then build out that ecosystem. Build it out through integrations, build it out through partnerships like we have with Auvik. You can import all of your clients' information, all of your asset information, so that you know that your ecosystem of data is correct. It's being fed from where it needs to be fed from. And then all in all, that will give your MSP an incredible amount of learning and an incredible amount of insights into how to properly get a command center up and running, get it doing it efficiently, and then moving forward as an MSP. Next up, how much does inefficiency actually cost your MSP? So this can be inefficiency mostly on the documentation process. Where is this documentation saved? Is it mixed between SharePoint and Confluence? Is it mixed between local computers and SharePoint? It's probably some sort of mixture. That is going to cause inefficiency because techs are looking here, they're looking there for information they should already have access to. And when they do reach that piece of documentation, how do they know that that's most up-to-date piece? Has there been asset information that's changed since then? Has there been a new version that's been updated that makes this document now out of date? There's no way of actually determining, is this document the actual correct one? You need to get to a place where everything is accessible from one place and you're not having this siloed experience where everyone's experience is different, whether it is finding their documentation in the correct way or not. The consequences of all of this is going to lead to a duplication of effort. People are going to have local copies. There's going to be shared copies on the cloud. Stuff's going to get duplicated. Stuff's going to become out of date, and it's just going to create frustration. It's going to create employee frustration, especially. And then, not to be too grim here, but if you think about it, if you have processes like this that are causing your employees to become frustrated and then ultimately leaving, very likely that MSP doesn't have a very good employee turnover process as well. So you're just going to continue to drive this vicious cycle as this stuff isn't being documented. You don't know who had access to it, et cetera, et cetera. Stop the vicious cycle and get everything in a good spot. Standardize your documentation and stuff that we will help you throughout this presentation.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Max. So over the next 15 minutes, so rough, probably will be 15, maybe 20 minutes, depending on the interaction and some of the questions we get. We're going to chat about some of the best practices to help you standardize and really, truly reap some of the benefits of it. You know, at a macro level, we're talking about creating an IT command center for your technicians. And, you know, simply put, that is just making sure that they have all of the information that they need when they need it and that they can trust it, right? Technicians hate digging for information, and it's super easy to overlook information that is just not available at your fingertips. So you can use these tips to create your own IT command center. But obviously, the topic we'll explore here, but today is really around the automation and trying to build up some of that trust. And you know, really, when it comes down to it, building an IT command center, I should say, you could solve this problem using either people, process, or technology. But ultimately, you know, the way to scale this is via technology. The IT command center is really a notion of you have all these tools, all of these different technologies, and all this information. How do you glue them all together so your techs know exactly where to look to get what information and ultimately trusting it? All right, so Max, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you if you want to start off on one of the first tips here.
For sure. So tip number one, as we've kind of mentioned already, standardize your document processes. Document all processes, whether it be setup guides, standard operating procedures, good to know, contacts, vendors, like literally everything should be documented. And then on the flip side of that, it should also be accessible from a single location or accessible from a location that the technician knows that it is an accurate piece of data. We don't want the situation that Patrick described where, you know, they're looking for this information, they're not able to find it, they're not able to set an automated workflow up on it to make sure it's staying updated. You know, rely on your softwares that you're using for this. Lean on them. Lean on the features that they're introducing that allow you to better standardize this information, whether it be templates that are available in your documentation platform or an article section, physical file uploads. There is an easy way to get all of this information into a single portal and then link it back and forth between anything else it may need to get. And then that way you will have that complete story of all of your clients' documentation, all of your clients' networks, how they're set up, how they should be ran, how they should be troubleshot, etc. And then back over to Patrick.
Yeah, so I guess diving a little bit deeper on that specific tip, let's maybe talk some of the specifics that you recommend you document. You know, and the top of both of I's lists, as we chatted before this, is really focusing on process documentation. You know, and ultimately the theme really comes down to be prepared for the unexpected, right? Max has already talked about employees leaving. You know, there's also things like extended sick leave, and et cetera. And, you know, I'd love to hear in the chat how people have been, you know, successfully or unsuccessfully, or some of the challenges you faced in onboarding employees over the last year or so, particularly where they're not necessarily always in the office, you know, leaning over to the next person, asking questions. But, you know, again, from the technician's perspective, you know, needing that information at 2 a.m. when something urgent happens, that's when you're in panic mode. So having access to that process is absolutely critical. You know, because I'm not sure about you, but, you know, in my past, I've done lots of overnight pager shifts, you know, getting paid to 2 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, something bad's happening in the client site. I go in, go in, remotely fix it, and go back to bed. And luck, just be my luck at 2:45, get another page. And my mind is just not at its best at getting that second or third page in the middle of the night, right? So, just fell asleep, just finished handling a previous emergency. And it is, you could be a rock star technician, but your mind isn't functioning at that point. So, having access to really clear step-by-step guides, make sure nothing gets overlooked, but it also creates a good peace of mind, right? And that was always kind of one of the reassuring things that I always had was, if I'm doubting myself, if I have a process list, even if I've memorized it, it's good to have as reference documentation. And we're going to soon talk about, as in the next section, talk about how some of these things are a little bit labor intensive, and sometimes that means they get skipped. But processes, could be seen as incredibly simple and obvious, but these often contain some of the most critical pieces of information, the little nuggets. So we'll talk about that shortly. But when it comes to process documentation, make sure to document everything, even the things that seem absolutely incredibly obvious, just in case you need it. Another big thing I'm a huge fan of when it comes to process is, I guess, a big discussion around being prescriptive versus introducing guardrails. Right, so being prescriptive allows you a step-by-step, do this, do this, do this, do this. And that's absolutely the right thing to do for certain types of people, and also certain types of situations. Things like escalations. There should never be any ambiguity or any doubt as to, who do I escalate, how do I escalate, when do I escalate. That should have absolutely zero ambiguity. Whereas other elements, especially technicians, they're troubleshooting. They're troubleshooters at heart. They're problem solvers at heart. And that's where I strongly encourage, as you start documenting some of these, introducing some guardrails around how you troubleshoot, what tools you use, what you don't use, and that type of thing. But because that also tries to instill a sense of creativity when they're problem solving. But I also recommend kind of counterbalancing guardrails with really specific examples for, when you do need to have prescriptions, then they're readily available. So that's a really interesting topic. I'd love to discuss more if we get any specific questions on it. But it's been something I've been trying to instill in all the different teams I've managed, is concept of guardrails versus being overly prescriptive. There's a time and a place for both, absolutely.
Patrick, just before we move on, I have a question from Kyle regarding documentation. So they're currently utilizing IT Glue, and he wishes it did more than just store documents that they manually create, as well as passwords. Pardon me. I have the travel bug, clearly, as anybody knows.
We all do.
And he's just wondering, do we have templates, or is it just simply uploading documents that you guys are talking about right now?
I'll let Max handle this one.
So Passportal does have templates. Yes, we have templates for every single category, from assets down to domains, SSL certificates, literally anything. And if you want to customize the template that we have available, you have that option as well, and it goes into a new section called customized documentation. So we do have templates that help partners, if they need to determine what actually needs to be captured from an asset or an internet WAN sort of thing. We help them by making these required fields that they can turn on or off to guide them towards, this is what you need to bring in for documentation. And I hope that was actually the question that I answered there.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
No worries. Yeah, and again, strongly encourage everyone to jump in the chat. Max and I particularly love when these things are interactive. Love to dive deeper. We lots of different knowledge here that we can share, and happy to do that on the fly here as well. So I guess the next subtopic, I guess, on following up Max's first recommendation is diving a little bit deeper in terms of standardization. So Max talked about standardizing how you document, what you document, etc. And a big part of that is making sure that those documents are standard across all of your customers, right? So we know that going off and manually documenting a customer's network and all the assets and all the information, they can absolutely take a lot of time, right? tracing unlabeled cables through walls and floors. Done that too many times to count. Reading and interpreting configuration and settings across everything. Manually drawing network diagrams by hand. You've been there, done that. Really fairly painful exercise for the average person. But as Max talked about, keeping that, in addition to all that, keeping it up to date and having no clue what's changed since your last review. Is that cable new? Has that cable been moved around? Those are really, really important topics. And and a lot of people we talk to overlook or kind of just skip over some of the things that are a little more complicated to document. But where this really leads to is documentation often ends up being a reaction to an external event for some of these more complex things to document. Whether an auditor is coming in and asking for information, or maybe your customer is specifically asking for it, or maybe you're needing to prep for a VCIO visit. Those are all great reasons for having a depth and breadth of documentation available. But the real efficiency gains come from your tech support team. Because these things are fairly laborious and intensive, this often leads to significant inconsistencies from customer to customer in terms of quality. And this unpredictable experience for technicians can be really frustrating and also disorienting. So, our next really big tip here is really focus on the automation aspect. Try to keep your customers all standardized in terms of what information is captured on one customer should be identical to the other one. Just to make sure there's a really consistent user experience for your technicians. And I guess last but not least, as a sub bullet to this first point that Max already touched on is, record more than the basics, right? We want to make sure. I'd strongly recommend, I guess I'd say, a hybrid approach between industry best practices and working backwards from what your technicians actually need in their times of need. For example, if your techs have to contact hardware support, do they know what the support contract is? Is it up to date? Do they have all the supporting information, the contract numbers, all that type of stuff? Or as they're looking through a network, do they know if that device is still being sold and therefore readily available in the event that they need a new one if it's out of warranty? All these types of things, that depth really plays a big part in terms of drawing some strong efficiencies. So Max, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you to maybe explore that topic a little bit more with our second tip.
For sure. So tip number 2 is eliminating waste of time. This is going to come through what Patrick just mentioned, standardizing your documentation, recording essentially everything so that your technicians don't have to rely on their memories or tapping someone, as Patrick mentioned, tapping someone on the shoulder to get access or to remind them of something. Record it all, put it into one single location, and then you may have access to a version control as well, giving you that historical evolution of the partner, how their assets have changed, how their business has grown throughout time. You will get that entire historical view of the entire time that they've lived in the software itself. So you'll be able to see those complex changes, areas that should have been documented that you now know can be documented. All that sort of stuff will be visible once you get all of this into one standard location. So secondly, on eliminating time waste is, if you can, house all this stuff in the same location and link it. Linking is essential. Patrick was mentioning, vendor contracts and contacts of who to actually contact. All that sort of stuff can be linked to the assets, can be linked directly to documentation or the credential itself. This credential logs into my Microsoft admin account. However, I also see on the right-hand side, it's linked to the Microsoft admin vendor. It's linked to my individual contact at Microsoft. And this is the individual that is using the computer. See all of that information directly in front of your eyes. So you're not having to guess, you're not having to look, you're not undergoing that siloed experience that we mentioned before, where every tech is experiencing something different based on where they're able to access this information. From an admin point of eliminating time waste, by housing this all in the same spot, you can easily control access. You can determine that your your level 3 technicians don't have access to this subset of documentation or don't have access to this subset of credentials. Get that incredibly granular access control. Make sure that everyone is accessing only what they need to access, and you as an admin know that that is true because you can see how it's set up. You can see how the groups are on it. You're not wasting time trying to figure out, does he or she have access to this individual piece of documentation or credential? And then the last part, limiting wasted time, this kind of works to the employee offboarding, is easily grant or revoke access. In the terms of revoking access, if you utilize Passportal, we have an automated Passport user offboarding program that allows you to automate the password changes so that before that technician has even left your building, their passwords have been changed. So all of these sort of things built with the standardized documentation and housing it in one location, having that information constantly fed by other trusted sources is going to help you eliminate a lot of time in your day-to-day operations on the MSP side.
Awesome. You cover that incredibly well, Max. So I'm going to breeze over one of my points here a little bit. But you know, I mean, just to maybe touch on one of the specifics there, you know, you talked about deltas and change logs and you know, that information over time. You know, that was always one of my biggest, you know, one of my biggest challenges as a technician was, you know, how often do you get the call where they're saying, hey, but it worked fine yesterday. It worked great last week. And you're just sitting there like, I have no clue what changed. Did something configuration wise change, hardware change, or something completely out of the blue change? You know, I think that type of history really helps you at bare minimum rule things out. If you can go back and say, well, look, nothing's actually changed in terms of the endpoint or the network infrastructure or the SaaS application, etc., over a period of time, and you're like, okay, well, you at least at bare minimum rules things out, if not points you in the right direction. And I'll pass it back to you, Max, just to touch on the third point.
For sure. So third tip is lean on your integrations. A lot of MSPs have multiple softwares that they're consistently monitoring, that they consistently need to be in. If you can, hook up all these softwares together, get it so that they're synchronizing with one another. They're importing the information that needs to be in the terms, in place of an Auvik Passportal integration. You know that client information will always be up to date inside of Passportal. You know that the asset information will always be up to date inside of Passportal because that information is being fed directly from Auvik, your trusted source. So you know that if you're referencing it in Passportal to see what it's all linked to, everything else, or if you're referencing it in Auvik to see how it links to everything else inside of that software, you know that you're looking at the same piece of asset information because Passportal gets its information from Auvik. So lean on these integrations. Ask your partners that you're working for if they don't have an integration. Put it into their idea center. Let it be known that you, the MSP partner, want these integrations. You want these daily syncs to always be happening. You want this real-time information at your fingertips that you know is accurate. It's going to reduce time. It's going to allow you to create a better partner experience for your own partners as your techs are able to get to the information they need in a much more efficient, quicker manner, whether that includes only going into Passportal or if it includes utilizing both Passportal and Auvik and anything else. They know exactly where they need to know. They know exactly where they need to go. They know exactly what they need to look at, how that may pertain to everything else within that system, and then creates that better experience for the partner, quicker ticket reduction, quicker resolution time, better overall partner experience.
Yeah, and so Max, that's a really good point, especially as it relates to documentation. You know, you talked about integrations a lot. You know, because there are so many different types of documentation, it's really easy to have specialized information live in like 15 different systems, especially as the amount of technology everyone's adopting grows. So integrations really allow for that single source of truth, but that information is always available at your fingertips. So as we chatted about this integration a little bit deeper, in our specific situation, Auvik can obviously help you to automatically document a number of things. What's on the network, where it's plugged in, or whether it's associated with with an access point, what that topology looks like, how the network's devices are configured, and have a backup of those configurations over time so you can see deltas. End of life information or end of support information for various devices, in addition to tons of other advanced performance monitoring capabilities such as syslog and traffic analysis. But as we talked about quite a few times here, information is only useful when it's accessible to the people who need it when they need it. Right. And this doesn't necessarily mean having one huge page with absolutely every single thing they could possibly ever need, but at bare minimum, providing the direct links and linking out to the different platforms, or providing direct links to various solutions, so that at least they know that the information exists and where to get it, and so they at least have that visibility. So Max, why don't you go ahead and show what this integration looks like between the two platforms?
For sure. So I've attached a couple different screenshots within here just to give a couple different pieces of how the integration works itself. So after setup, when the integration runs, the partners will be able to see the results. So we will have a sync overview page that gives you the full results of everything, what it matched to in Passportal, and if it was imported or not. Additionally, partners can utilize this space to see that asset from Auvik has incorrectly matched to asset within Passportal. Within this page, you can correct that incorrect matching, have it correctly matched to the correct asset, and then from then on forth, only match to that asset. So fix those technology mistakes, something that may have happened with the matching pattern and us incorrectly matching it there. Additionally, you can exclude information. So I don't want this asset to ever sync into Passportal. It doesn't pertain to anything in there. It just doesn't need to go in there. Tell the integration, don't worry about this one, and we won't. We'll never look for it again. We won't sync it, and moving on forth, it is considered forgotten. Once inside the portal, if we're looking at the right-hand screenshot, this is an example of a template, how the information will be presented to you, and then all the relevant linked information on the right-hand side. So as I mentioned before, when you're on an asset, you can see the vendor, you can see any licensing information, a printer it may be connected to, the physical contact owner of that asset, all that information available directly on the asset itself. So it's not going in and then trying to figure it out. It's already figured out. It's there on your right-hand side. Quickly access any of that other information. And then finally, when the asset has been synced from Auvik, how do I know? How do I know it isn't a manual asset that I've imported or one that I'm updating myself? We attach the Auvik signature onto every asset. So you know exactly where it's being synced from and where we're getting that source of information, so that if you have multiple integrations set up, like an Auvik, a PSA, and an RMM, you know where that particular asset is getting its source of information from. So we won't lead you to guessing that either. We'll tell you exactly, this is an Auvik-driven asset. This is where we're getting the information from.
I think Kyle's got another question here.
For sure.
Can Passportal pull from ConnectWise so that it can map the sales order to an asset?
Not yet, no. So our managed integration does not do that yet. That is on the roadmap, but as of today, no, it cannot.
All right. So I guess, wrapping up, I guess this overall topic. So we've talked about the concept of an IT command center, how it improves productivity, talked about a couple of specific points. I guess I just wanted to leave everyone maybe with one final last little tip. Many years ago, I was working at an MSP, and we were using Six Sigma's business process improvement framework. And one of the things that we really identified, kind of tying back into what we were talking earlier, is a lot of different cases, documentation was very reactionary to an external event. right? So, preparing for an audit, preparing for various external events. But that doesn't help. That doesn't help the technicians as much as we were trying to talk through in this presentation. So one of the interesting ideas that came up was the concept of audit fire drills. So what we talked about just implementing is, once a quarter, once a month, once, however frequency you want, choose a particular customer and pretend like you're getting audited. And that really kind of kept the teams really obviously making sure the documentation was up to date, but it also raised really interesting questions around, well, we don't actually capture this type of information and be really useful for these types of scenarios. So it really kind of fed back into the whole business process improvement of inspiring some feedback, but it also really built some strong habits around making sure documentation was always up to date. And the fire alarm analogy and the fire alarm concept worked very, very well. So I'd strongly suggest trying that out and seeing how it goes, and love to hear some feedback on it. So I guess, Max, just to wrap things up, I want you to finish things off.
For sure. So on the Enable and Passportal side, we do offer a solution that will help you get all of your credentials and documentation into a single location. We have automated processes that allow you to monitor that stuff in the background to remove any manual intervention, or actually to be proactive also about manual intervention should it need to come to that case. So all this is available from within our standard Passportal Plus Documentation Manager. I believe that Caitlin is going to be dropping a link to a little sales promo that we're currently running. So if anybody would like to take advantage of that, the link itself is inside of the chat window.
This is where we're missing one of the legal disclaimers saying this photo was taken before the elements of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Max and I will obviously have some time to stick around if you have any really specific questions, want to chat about best practices, how people are implementing specific documentation processes, what people are documenting. We're here for you. We'll stick around for a few minutes, and otherwise have an amazing day.
Yes. Thank you everyone for joining.